Hey everyone, welcome to the RotoGrinders Morning Grind Podcast. I'm your host, Stevietpfl. It's Monday, it's December 14th, it's 2020, and we're here with the Week 14 NFL Review Podcast. I'm joined by my good buddy, Blenderhd, Jordan Cooper. How are you doing, my friend?
Not awful. It wasn't horrible, but I mean it could have been worse. The DFS gods are giving me karma for the big win in October by just like you're gonna come this close in cash games and then you're gonna lose like for multiple weeks in a row.
That's funny. Listen, I got carried by a couple tournament lineups this week, so that's always a good thing, and I guess I decided like this week because I wasn't gonna play like Devontae Adams on my main team, that it was a good week to kind of just fade double ups. Because I thought it was an amazing spot for him, and I was trying to create leverage with Aaron Jones. So I ended up not playing a ton of cash games this week. So I mostly played single entry and 3 entry max, and I ran out of 20 entry max script more of just because I was doing the lineup HQ show on Saturday, but I was really focused on like single entry and 3 entry max stuff this week because I Jordan, like, it was a week that I felt like there was leverage everywhere. Like nobody was running back McKisnick with like San Francisco players. I love Jonathan Taylor. He wasn't getting a lot of love because so much news opened up at running back. So we'll get into it more when we talk tournaments, but we always start with cash games. I just wanted to start off by saying, like, I did not build like a safer cash type of build main lineup this week. I built like a very high leverage tournament team this week. So like I'm not going to be much help when it comes to this. I did know going into the slate that like Rodgers, Adams, McKisnick, and Perryman were going to be very popular in cash games. So run me down what you were looking at heading into the weekend for cash.
Okay, so in cash games, on DraftKings, obviously. We're looking through results DB. So I have the 250 double up, the $100 double up, the $25 double up, the $5 double up. Obviously, if you're a serious player, you should be going through these on results DB. It's free, it's on RotoGrinders, and compare what you played to what other sharper people played or what the field played. And typically the closer you are to the more sharper players. I mean, not everyone at the higher stakes is the sharpest of tools in the shed, but for the most part it is. So if you were on the right track and you didn't get there, that doesn't necessarily mean you did anything wrong. Now, if you're way off the beaten path and you didn't get there, well, then you have some process problems. Okay, so in cash games at quarterback, you most likely were playing Aaron Rodgers. If you didn't, I mean, I guess you could have played Mahomes. Some people played Herbert, but Rodgers was the de facto quarterback chalk. You could have paid up. There weren't that many quarterbacks to pay down for. Some people took a shot on Jalen Hurts, and you got there, which is fine. A $5,100 running quarterback is absolutely in play. The question is, it's his first start in the NFL. Are you willing to take that risk? Because he could have easily gotten 8 points if he did badly. So I didn't consider him in cash games, but I don't think you're nuts if you did. I'm going to go through the wide receiver position first because the running back position was actually the more interesting position on this slate. At wide receiver, if you paid up, you played Devontae Adams. If you played Tyreek Hill, if you played Ridley, if you played anything like Thielen and up as your most expensive wide receiver, that probably wasn't the best build. You could have played any of those guys with Devontae Adams, I guess. But Devontae Adams at 9,300 was, I mean, he was the best projected, like almost the best projected value on the slate, even at his high price. So you probably played him. Then at the low range, if you're going to play a cheap receiver, you probably played Brashad Perriman with Denzel Mims out, and Jamison Crowder was questionable. But Perriman was the safer play. I mean, I know some projections had Berrios if Crowder was out as a good value, but you wouldn't have known that for the late games. So I didn't want to risk it by if I was going to play a cheap wide receiver by playing Berrios. because Brandon Cooks was ruled out, that increased the target share for Kiki Cutie at 5,000. And if you wanted to play Chad Hansen instead of Perriman at 3,900, I thought that was perfectly fine as well. Same thing for Jordan Akins at the tight end position. If you play Texans in your lineup, that as median plays, that they were pretty good. Then you had the Carolina receivers with DJ Moore out. So if you played Samuel at 5,200 or Robbie Anderson at 6,200, I thought those were the mid-range plays, like them and QT were like in the mid-range that if you got there. Corey Davis was an option, but he wasn't as appealing once news came in. But I mean, if you did play Corey Davis in cash games, I mean, he only got 5.4, but I don't think you were wrong. I don't think he was optimal compared to other players in that range. But if you did, I don't think you're an idiot.
Did you,
and then
really quick, did you mention Curtis Samuel when you were going through like the wide receivers?
Yeah, I just said the Carolina, okay. The Panthers wide
receivers. I thought that's what you said. I just wanted to, I wanted to clarify. Keep going.
Right. And if you chose Anderson for 1,000 more, you chose Samuel, like either or. You could have played both. If you wanted to play both, you could have played both. Of course, now you're increasing the variance of your lineup. The Panthers completely crap the bed. You're in trouble. But if you did play both, that's fine. The tight end position, I'll get back to running back because running back's the most interesting position. Yeah. At tight end, if you paid down, you probably played either Akins or Logan Thomas. If you paid up, you played Travis Kelce. I'm not necessarily sure if that was the best build to pay up at tight end. And then defense, you probably played the Cowboys or the Seahawks. But defense is defense. If you got on something else, that's not... You can never be completely wrong at defense. It's a very high variance position. Now at running back, we had a lot of options at running back that made sense depending on the construction of your lineup. Most likely, you were taking at least one 5K or below running back. Okay, you were taking at least one. The question was, do you take one? Do you take two? Do you take three? Okay. At the low end, you had DeAndre Washington, 4,000, because Gaskin was ruled out on the COVID list, playing against the Chiefs. They also had Laird and McGuire active as well, and obviously in a poor game script for Washington. I didn't play him, but I mean he was viable. McKissick with Gibson out, perfectly fine. Duke Johnson with David Johnson out, he was fine. If you played, even if you played Gio Bernard, I put him way down on the priority list, but I mean, he was in that range. Most likely he wouldn't be the only one that you played in that range. And then you had, if you paid up, you probably played Derrick Henry at 8,700. Me personally, someone that's that touchdown dependent at that salary, I'm just not going to do it. And mathematically, you know, he needs a 75th to 80th percentile outcome to beat me. Of course, yesterday he got that. But if I played the slate a million times, most likely than not, he's not going to put up a score that is necessary. Like he got 39 points, so like he was necessary. He was at the point and ownership. You know, when he's like 35% in double up contests, it's going to make it very hard for you to cash without him. I mean, you could have, but it just makes it much harder. If he would have put up just a median game of like 24, that would have been fine. I wouldn't have. You wouldn't have needed Derrick Henry. So, like for me, if I need to rely on the fact that he needs 200 yards and 2 touchdowns in order to beat me in double ups, like I'm going to bet against that every single time. And then in the mid range, you could have played Ronald Jones once Fournette was ruled out. Playing for a 30-point total favorite. I mean, why not? And he does catch passes out of the backfield. So he was an option. You also had David Montgomery. I thought Ronald Jones was a better play than David Montgomery. David Montgomery got there with efficiency. I think he only had 9 touches in the game, right? Because they didn't even run him when they were up. But I don't think he was optimal. But if you play David Montgomery, I don't think you're nuts. Same thing for Eckler. If you played Eckler, I don't think you were nuts. It just really depended on the construction of your lineup. So my cash lineup, I scored 141.1. and I played Rodgers at quarterback. I played Duke Johnson, J.D. McKissick, and Ronald Jones at running back. Adams at wide receiver. Robbie Anderson at wide receiver. Kiki Cutie at wide receiver. My tight end was Hayden Hurst, and my defense was the Cowboys. And I set myself up so obviously I could switch, late swap with the tight end. I could go down to Logan Thomas. I could go down from Rodgers to Stafford. Adams, I could always switch to Ridley. I mean, there were options for me. I was good going through the 1 p.m. games. I know I didn't have Henry, but there was enough room in double ups where if Adams put up a good enough score, 30 plus points, I would have been fine. For a lot of head-to-heads, that worked out. I won 40% of my head-to-heads, which is obviously a losing day, but it's not a $0 day. So that was perfectly fine. I was like 4 or 5 points off the cash line in most double ups. And I could have always switched to DK Metcalf. I gave myself some late swap options. I could have gone down from Robbie Anderson to Curtis Samuel. And then where would that 1,000 taken me? Not really much. Same for Kiki QT down to Chad Hansen. Like, where did that really get me? It could get me up to David Montgomery from one of the cheap running backs, but I didn't see a point in doing that. Some people play Aaron Jones in cash. I thought that was a bit risky because they do give carries to Jamal Williams. So, I mean, I see he got the 15-ish% ownership in cash games. I still think at that 7,600, you're playing Eckler. You play James Robinson before Aaron Jones. I mean, it's just that the way the Packers run their offense, like they're going to pass a lot at the end at the goal line, and Jamal Williams is going to get half the carries anyway. So yeah, for GPP, he was a great leverage play, right? But in cash games, like I didn't think that was the right play at all. But yeah, so that's essentially, I think, the cash construction. Stevie, what did you do in your quote main lineup? Even though you fully admit that you were playing a GPP lineup, not a median cash build for double ups.
So again, like you said, I knew this week, I felt like there was a clear, like my cash lineup would have looked very close to yours. Very close. The only difference, I think, I would have had Jonathan Taylor in there. I really liked him this week, and like he was like my second highest owned guy in general. So my main, so I had 2 lineups that I really liked this week, and I split them in single entry. One scored 130, the other scored 193. So like I wish I would have split it the other way, because like the one that scored the most, I put in the smaller, like $50 single entry and stuff like that. But my main team was Herbert with McKisnick, Taylor, and Jones. Again, I was trying to create leverage off of Adams with Aaron Jones. I knew the risk. And then I went Keenan Allen with the run back on Herbert, Nelson Aguilar with the run back on Taylor, Adam Thielen as just a very different type of option, and Cole Kmet with the Giants defense. I had the Cowboys defense in there, and I swapped like 5 minutes before lock, rookie mistake, tinkering to try to be different when I was already different enough. We could talk about that a little bit. And then my other main team that I ran out there was Mahomes with Taylor, Ronald Jones, and McKisnick. And then it had Tyreek Hill with the run back on Holmes, Nelson Aguilar with the run back on Taylor, Tim Patrick as like my cheap play, and Gesicki as the run back to Mahomes and Hill, with Washington as my defense to pair it with McKisnick.
That sounds pretty good. I mean, that those lineups make sense. They're not cash lineups, but I mean, right. they make absolute sense. So I mean, and some of those players, worked out. If you want to talk about GPPs, because I think I think this was a much better GPP slate than a cash slate in general.
100%.
I thought it was interesting. I said on my stream on Saturday night that the predominant build was going to be barbell, stars and scrubs, barbell type, cheap plays and expensive plays, Henry, Adams, guys up there, and then cheap guys in the 3K, 4K range. And I thought at the running back position that the less used build would use the mid-range running backs. Like people are going to go and pay 7K plus for a running back and then pay like 5K minus for a running back. And that's going to be their running back spots. So like in my build that I was building for large field tournaments, I played a ton of guys in between that. So I played Jonathan Taylor. I played David Montgomery. I played Ronald Jones. I played James Robinson. I played Ezekiel Elliott. He didn't get there. I played like I'm looking at the running back position, because even if you don't go up and down, you're still paying about the same price. So I'm getting different at running back, and the variance for running back with the touchdowns and the committees are high. So I typically don't want to be on chalk running back builds. So I didn't have much Aaron Jones because I was jamming in Davante Adams. But in that mid-range, like having Mike Davis, I had like guys in the Chris Carson, right? I had a lot of Chris Carson plus Brashad Perriman. I had a lot of Mike Davis plus KJ Hamler, right? I had a bunch of I went really low. I had Drew Lock stacks that did well, other than the fact that Noah Fant got injured, so I got 0 at tight end. So that didn't work out. And same for Jonathan Taylor, playing Jonathan Taylor and then Aguilar or Waller across from him. Playing David Montgomery and then playing QT or Hanson or Duke, some Chicago, Allen Robinson with Duke Johnson, like back and forth 1-1s of that game. And based on my construction, it was unique. It just didn't have Derrick Henry in it. So I mean, like it's hard to win much, or it's nearly impossible to win first when you decide to just X button Derrick Henry and not play the highest owned running back that puts up 39 points. But I mean, I had flames in a lot of my running back lineups. It's the wide receivers that killed me. When I'm playing, a lot of Adam Thielen, when I'm playing Davante Adams with Marvin Jones, and Marvin Jones doesn't get there. Like I get a snowflake in a lot of my lineups that, like, it doesn't matter that I have I have Montgomery and Jonathan Taylor in the lineup with Nelson Aguilar but I have Duke Johnson in one of the running back spots, and now and a wide receiver I have who knows, someone else that has a snowflake 8 points or something, and you're looking at that going, okay, that's 170 points, but not good enough to win a GPP. So I thought a lot of the construction-based leverage was at the running back position and not necessarily wide receiver, because typically we see it more at the wide receiver than at running back. But I think the running back ownership was spread out enough that if you played the mid running back build, that I thought that's plus EV if we played the slate. If Derrick Henry puts up 22 points, that build wins.
Yeah, man, you mentioned Ezekiel Elliott. So I always build a team as I'm doing the podcast with Grant, the breakdown podcast on Wednesday afternoon. So I built, and I always leave it in something. And so did you see that goat fuel contest on FanDuel this week? $3 3-entry max. So I left my original build in that team, in that contest. It finished 7th. And it had Ezekiel Elliott. It's hilarious.
It finished 7th with Zeke in it?
With Zeke in it.
Basically, you could have played virtually anyone else in that spot and won.
Yeah, so it had all the guys that I liked. It had Gesicki, it had Nelson Aguilar, it had Montgomery, Jonathan Taylor, all the guys that I talked about on Wednesday, and it had a Mahomes Tyreek Hill build. So yeah, so if Zeke does anything, nobody in the top 10 joined me in having Zeke. So if Zeke does anything,
if Zeke had that touchdown that Pollard was in for,
yeah,
you would have been fine.
I would have been really close. I would have finished 3rd, but I got a case of goat fuel coming. So I'm pumped.
What is goat fuel? What the hell even is goat
It's fuel? Jerry Rice's energy drink. So I had to search and see what it was, because I was like, oh, all right, well, but yeah, I thought it was funny that I do that every week, and this is the first week that team did really well, and I had some really good teams on FanDuel as well. But like it seemed like there was a dud. Like I finished 17th in the 50 on FanDuel as well. But it had Aaron Jones. So like if I had gotten like if Aaron Jones had hit instead of Adams, I probably win the $50 single entry over there. So like I felt like tournaments this week. I'm with you. I feel like this is much more of a tournament slate than it was a cash slate. We could quickly circle back to cash games. I don't think there's anything too crazy when it came to cash this week. I feel like there were clear cut options. You were probably playing Aaron Rodgers. If you weren't playing Rodgers, I could see going Herbert, Mahomes, and then like you said, if you went Hurts and just took the pure price savings, I don't think that was crazy. I do think the matchup was terrible, and he got there in a really hard matchup. So good for him. But I do think like you probably played Rodgers, right? Like, isn't that what you said?
Yeah. I played
Like
Rodgers
that was the guy in cash this week. Like you look at, he was 30% in the $5. He was 43% in the 250. Like sharp players were playing Aaron Rodgers in cash this week, and I feel like you wanted Rodgers and Adams, and especially like when the Ronald Jones news with the Fournette, like everything opened up where it was very easy to play Rodgers with Adams in cash games. And like I felt like that was the build that's where you started your build this week.
Right. I mean, and you could have played Derrick Henry with both of them. The question is are you willing to go down at so many other spots? Are you comfortable with Perriman and Chad Hansen and a punt tight end? And I mean, like it was one of those things where like if Derrick Henry does not get at least 2 touchdowns and 120 yards, like you're not going to need him. So that's why at 8,700 we had other running back options. Now, of course I'm talking with everyone knowing that Derrick Henry put up 215 yards and 2 touchdowns against the horrible Jaguars defense, but mathematically, like that's an 80th percentile outcome. So that means it'll happen 20% of the time. You know, if he hits his median, which is 50% of the time, that's 24 points. It's still fine. I mean, it's still plenty of raw points. But if Derrick Henry didn't get the last touchdown, like I would have cashed in all my double ups. So like if you told me before the slate, Derrick Henry needs to put up at least 32 points for me to not cash my double ups, like how do I not make that? How do I bet that he's going to score 32 plus points? No, I'm going to bet against that. So I know the hindsight bias is like, oh, I can't believe I didn't play Derrick Henry in cash. It's like those are the types of things I look at and go like that. If he gets there, I lose. Then that's if he gets his 80th percentile outcome, then I lose. And because at his ownership, that's what happened. I mean, Derrick Henry is very similar to what Cheese says about Robbie Ray in MLB, right? Very high variance pitcher, right? Could walk 7 guys, but he could also strike out 15. So I view Derrick Henry as like when he's chalk in GPPs, especially when he's chalk, you don't play him, and when no one's playing him, that's when you play him. So I have no qualms in the world about not playing. There was no world in cash games yesterday that I was playing Derrick Henry. So I could look at my construction and go, could I have paid down for Samuel instead of Anderson? Could I have gone up from this guy to that guy? But there was no construction in which I was not playing Adams and I was playing Henry. And I didn't feel any comfortable playing both of them in the same lineup and have to rely on 4 punt plays to get at least 8 to 12 points in order for me to even hit that line. Because if Derrick Henry doesn't even get 20 points, like your lineup is dead. It's dead. You have guys that don't have any upside. You have, you're relying on Blenderhd Perriman to get you there, and I'm not going to rely on Blenderhd Perriman to get me there. So I just want to highlight the fact that it's not that Derrick Henry projected well. Even the Blitz, Curry hates Derrick Henry, and the Blitz had him higher than like any other projection in the industry. But at 8,700, like most of his projection is touchdown oriented. So if he doesn't get the bonus and 2 touchdowns, like he does not pay off 8,700 at all in any way. And you'd be better off. You could find those points elsewhere for cheaper. So that's what I tried in GPP. That's exactly what I tried to do. And for the most part, I got there. For the most part, I actually did get there. It's just that I had the snowflake stacks and, the lineups with some Noah Fant in my tight end spot. And it's like, okay, well, that lineup's dead. Like it was one of those types of things. I actually did fairly well at the running back position in most of my lineups. Not my Zeke lineups, but most of my lineups. It was having too much Thielen or Marvin Jones and those types of guys kind of in the mid-range, Corey Davis in certain spots like that, they kind of killed, individually killed most of my lineups.
Yeah, even if you look at like tight end from this past weekend in cash games, I feel like there were 5 to 8 tight ends you could have played that nobody really could have argued. Like if you wanted to go up, you could go up for Kelsey. You could go up for Waller. You could pay down and go Thomas, Akins, Komet. Any of those guys were Robert Tonyan. Like any of those guys were viable in cash this week. So I don't think there was craziness. I think it was a week in cash games that like defense was very clear. You were going Cowboys or Seahawks. Like it was very clear that because of the pricing on the slate as far as defense goes, it was very clear where you were going at defense this week. So, and then you named off a lot of wide receivers. There were 15 to 20 guys you could have played in cash games this week, but like Adams needed to be in there. Let's move it over and talk tournaments. I love this slate for tournaments. I did the Sunday morning show with Tambo, and like that's a fun show. I've never done it before, and like we did lineup HQ and we talked about it, and like I had already built my script before the show, and like as I was building, Jordan, I was like, there's going to be so many people that play certain parts of games and don't run it back. And I opened up Results DB this morning and I was like, oh, I'm so right. Like it was crazy to see, if we look at general ownership, how many people played McKissick without any run backs. Like this is the guy that was fourth highest owned on average in tournaments this week. And nobody ran it back at all. Like you look, and I had to go way down here. Hold on. It's like Ayuk was 5% owned, and the Washington defense was 5% owned. So 10% of McKissick's 20 to 25% was run back. So many people play J.D. McKissick without running it back. And I called it Sunday morning on the show. I said, everybody's going to play J.D. McKissick without running it back, and that's a huge mistake. And what's funny is McKissick didn't really get there. He didn't do bad. He didn't get there. But like his run backs did. Washington defense did fantastic. Ayuk did fantastic. Like, so if you ran it back, you actually did really well.
Yeah, I mean, I take a look at a lot of the plays on this slate with the lack of correlation, but also I think based on what I'm looking at in comparison to the higher stakes versus lower stakes is news oriented. We don't talk about this a lot, but in the lower stakes contests, I'm more likely, and I believe you should be more likely to jam in late news versus the higher stakes. Okay. Late news, meaning news that comes in at like maybe Friday night forward. Okay. Because lower stakes players, more casual players don't take notice to it or don't adjust their lineups because of it. I mean, the closer to lock the news is in, the more you should jam it just based on ownership. So for instance, we take a look at Ronald Jones. Like Ronald Jones was just a middling, like you could have played him like before, like 11:30 Eastern. But once Fournette was inactive, like that boosted Ronald Jones's projection and made him a better play. In the large millie, in the high stakes millie, he was 25% owned. In the play action, he was 10% owned. So like at 25% owned, I think that's efficient. Like you didn't gain anything by play. I mean, it was fine. It was a good play. It was fine. But I'm just saying from a relative value standpoint of, getting leverage, like you didn't gain much because, higher stakes players noticed that and started building. I didn't have any Ronald Jones in any of my 110 lineups at 11:30 in the morning on Sunday. I ended up with 23% of them because I'm going in and I'm taking out Zeke and putting him in. I'm taking out Montgomery and putting him in. I'm taking out all my mid-range. I'm like, I need to spread out more of my mid-range running back in my lineups. So we see that. We see DeAndre Washington with Gaskin on the COVID list on Saturday. In the high stakes millie, he was 20% owned, but in the play action, he was 9% owned. Okay. We see the Kiki Cutie and Chad Hansen, about 12% owned in the high stakes, Millie. They were 7 to 9% owned in the play action. Duke Johnson the reason I played a bunch of Duke Johnsons because I thought people are going to go to QT and Hansen and Akins, and I'm like, Duke Johnson can catch passes out of the backfield. Yes, it's not as often as Texans type of offense, but do I rely on DeAndre Washington or do I rely on Duke Johnson? I know Duke Johnson's going to be on the field 95% of the time, and it's good leverage. So I played more of him. I know he only got 8.9 points, but the Texans in general didn't do all that well anyway. But this late news type of stuff, right? Like even Berrios. Like Berrios was only 2% owned in the play action. He was 10% owned in the higher stakes, with Crowder possibly being fake active, right? Because he was active and he ended up playing. And then of course Berrios came in for enough snaps that he got some points. But you see very often that any type of news like that past Friday night, not talking about Tuesday or Wednesday, because that's typically on Tuesday and Wednesday, if anything happens, it's reflected in the content that people are reading and the shows people are listening to. So if you listen to RG shows, the ASA show that I do, or the OGs, or the preview show, or any of the premium shows, the Tournament Takes podcast, like those are all made on by Friday morning. So like no one's going to be talking about DeAndre Washington. No one's going to be talking about Chad Hansen or anything. No one's going to be talking about any of that because that news isn't even in. Like you would not, if Gaskin was playing, no one would play DeAndre Washington, right? If Cooks was in, Hansen and Cooties ownership would have plummeted, like those types of things. But once Friday night comes around, there isn't that much more content that people consume. That they're reading articles, not just on RotoGrinders, just in general. It could be the USA Today. Who knows what they're reading? It's all written before this news comes out, so it's hard for a lot of people to adjust based on that news, and it's going to happen easier. People are going to adjust more so at the higher stakes that use projection models and are much more attentive because they're putting a lot more money in play. This is what they kind of do for a living, right? Or at least in a serious manner for a side income. But at the lower stakes, there are probably plenty of people didn't even realize. I could probably go in and I could see, Myles Gaskin in the play action was 0.34% owned. Now it sounds like, oh, he's barely owned, but take that off the rake. he gets 0. So, Brandon Cooks was 0.22% owned, right? If we add up some of these injured players, it gets that, you eliminate the rake by 1 or 2%, and that's nice, especially in contests that have 15% rake in it. But if people are if at the lower stakes, especially, if people are going to adjust by just taking out Brandon Cooks out of their lineup or just taking Myles Gaskin out of their lineup, it's very similar to NBA, where people are like, oh, I never late swap, only if a player gets injured. It's like, no, well, if a player gets injured, that changes the whole dynamic of the game, and maybe you should be playing other players, not just the guy that fills in for him, but how does that affect the slate? So at the lower stakes, it doesn't happen as much. So I'm more likely, since I do play the large field, lower stakes contests, like the slant, like the play action, those types of things, I'm much more likely to say, well, Ronald Jones I'm jam him in because I'm going to get him at such lower ownership than I would at high stakes that it makes it a much more profitable play, regardless of what happened, regardless of the outcome. So I think by default, if you adopted in any sport, this is not just NFL, NBA also, and if something happens at 10 minutes before lock, I'm more likely to jam it than to okay, I could throw them in some, only because I know that in the lower stakes contests that people don't react quickly. So yeah, sometimes you overreact to news, and that happens, right? You go, oh, that really wasn't that big of a deal. But the times that it is a big deal, you're going to gain so much leverage off of so much more of the field in the lower stakes that if you had that mindset of by default, if there's anything that happens at 11:30, anything that happens Saturday afternoon, if we get a midnight Schefter tweet that says that some guy is out that we weren't expected to be out, be more inclined to say, well, who benefits in that case, and play double the amount that you would have normally at the lower stakes. At the higher stakes, it doesn't give you enough of an edge because more people react to it.
Listen, you named all those podcasts, and the morning grind that is out on Wednesday was talking about Chad Hansen. So,
well, Chad Hansen, I think, was in play regardless because of Will Fuller being out or whatever.
Yeah, I just wanted to bust you, bust your balls a little bit.
But QT at 5,000 wouldn't have been as great of a projected play without Cook's target share being
gone. Before we get out of here, I do want to point out like the biggest thing that stood out to me in projected ownership this week, and even looking at it in results DB today, was, and like you don't always have to run it back, but like we talk about it so much that like if there's going to be a chalk stack, we had a clear-cut chalk stack this week. Green Bay Packers. Everybody wanted to play Green Bay. Everybody wanted to play Adams. Everybody wanted to play Aaron Rodgers. I am shocked that like Aaron Jones got as much leverage as he did. We didn't project him to have that much ownership. But what's crazy to me is where
the Lions. Where's the Lions?
Where's the Lions? Like even in projected ownership, like Marvin Jones was projected at like 5.1%. Swift was really low. Amendola was really low. So like if you wanted Adams and Rodgers to get their ceiling, who was going to do it on Detroit? And like you just look, and like I was trying to see like who the first like Detroit player was.
Hawkinson was like 6 or 7% in higher stakes and like 4% in the play action. Amendola was Amendola, who I had like 10% of because I correlate my lineups more. Amendola was sub 1% in the milli, 0.81%. I mean, like even Sanu, like if you wanted to play Sanu, that was like 1%. Like I just like if anything, Hawkinson, I can like to me, if you're like, well, I don't want to fill up a receiver spot, I don't want to play Marvin Jones, like play Hawkins. I mean, at least he fills a tight end spot that you could use. So I had a ton. I mean, I also had tons of Stafford stacks. So I tried playing the chalk game the opposite way. Stafford, Jones, Hawkinson. Stafford, Amendola, Hawkins, some combination of those three, either 3+1, 2+1, and then play Adams on the other side. So like now Stafford gives me as many points as Rodgers for $1,800 less. And I still get Adams points. I still get his 35 to 40 points when Rodgers goes off. And then I obviously get Jones, Hawkinson, Amendola, stuff like that. It didn't work out, sure. But with that ownership, like my Stafford stacks plus Adams, like I was playing the chalkiest wide receiver, yet I already have enough leverage in my lineup for large field contests. Like I'm done. Like once I play Stafford, Jones, Hawkinson, Adams, like just jam in the chalk at that point. I mean, because I just look at the projected ownership and go, like, well, Jones is like 4 or 5%, Hawkinson's 5%, Stafford's 2%. Adams, sure, he's 30%, but then like what do I care now about? Like, do I need to play like super contrarian in any of the other spots? No. So now I'm putting in my David Montgomery plus something. I mean, now I don't have to worry that much about ownership in those lineups and just play the best projected plays.
Well, did you see the one that won the $20 Millie Maker? Don't
get me started. I don't know how you put that lineup together, but whatever.
But at least it had a little
double
bit of
tight end and I mean, that's the point of the Millie. It has so many entries in it that you could bang your head against the keyboard and get lucky. I mean, the win. That's why I never say study the winning Millie lineup. Study the top players, or at least study the top 0.1% of lineups, right? Because you can take a look at the second, some of the lineups in the top 10 and go, wow, those are really well-constructed lineups. If they just got 2 more points, they would have been the winning lineup. So like just because someone could bang their head against the keyboard and come up with a winning team doesn't mean that there's like no stress, that every lineup is equal to one another. No, the reason why you correlate, the reason why you gain leverage is to increase the probability of you winning. Doesn't mean that it's guaranteed to win. There's still, 30%, 40% of the lineups in the Millie are lineups that seem like people bang their head against the keyboard. And once you have 100,000 of those, like one of those Someone's going to get that 9-leg parlay right out of the blue, and that's going to be the winning line. There's enough lineups. When you're dealing with smaller field contests, you typically don't deal with those types of lineups. It doesn't mean that, the small field contests are easier. No, they're actually harder. It's just because the skill level of the player is so much higher. But in the large field stuff, it's like, no, you have to deal with the fact that, good 40% of the time, the lineup that wins is a lineup that if we played the slate a million times, you're going to lose on. You're going to lose money on. And just like in a game like poker, where, yeah, you could make a call and get a one-outer and win. I mean, does it make it the right call? No. If you keep on doing that, you're going to lose. You're going to lose all your money. And if you're the person that puts their money in good, like over time, you're going to make more money. So that's why, like, once you mentioned, like, the winner of the Millie, it's like, it's great. I have nothing to add other than, like, yeah. So there's 100,000 bang your head against your keyboard lineup. So one of them could win. Yeah, sure. Okay. I guess so.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I was close this week. Like, and I was looking at some of like the teams that I had, like, and that were close, and like Mahomes with Hill, with Gesicki, Taylor with Aguilar, like McKisnick with the Washington defense. Like, there was so many ways that you could get like the guys, like, for me, that I liked with correlation. Aaron Jones scores 20 points, I have a monster week. So, like, I'm okay with that. Like, all the correlation that I played, man, it was a close week to having one of those big weeks. And it's just, you look at, like, just, man, we talk about this every week, it feels like, but the chalk stack getting zero, like, run back is just, it just blows my mind that, like, we're in week 14 of the NFL season, and like people are playing all these chalk options without running it back. And like, it's just like, like, even Derrick Henry, like, he's another one that, like, if you played Derrick Henry as chalk and didn't either play like the Tennessee defense or like one of the pieces on Jacksonville, like, he was massive chalk. How do I be different with a guy that's going to be 25% owned? Like, you be different with running it back with like Keelan Cole or Eifert or James Robinson. Like, I don't know.
It could be, and I mean, it's not a matter of like who. It's a matter of just someone. I mean, unless you plan on building the rest of your lineup as extremely contrarian, you could get contrarian by just attaching a correlated piece to the already chalk. That's what I was trying to do with Davante Adams. It's like, okay, I don't mind Davante Adams in this lineup because instead of playing a 5% owned player from some other game, I'm going to play a similarly projected player that's 5% owned from the same game. Like, why not? I mean, when all things come down to it, if the difference in the projection is a half a point, and I have to give up a half a point to get the correlation of a similarly owned player, right? I'm looking at Marvin Jones in my Adams lineups going, do I play Marvin Jones or do I play Corey Davis, right? Because they're 100 apart from each other. Marvin Jones and Corey Davis projected close to each other. Corey Davis is actually going to be twice as, 15% owned. Marvin Jones is going to be 5% owned. Is there any reason I should be playing Corey Davis in a lineup with Davante Adams when I have Marvin Jones there? Like, no, I'm just going to play Marvin Jones. Like that's the thing that me and Stevie, that's what we're talking about. It's not you have to do it. It's that if you're building lineups already and you're choosing between players, even if you're just hand building, like, you should be thinking in those terms of well, I'm going to play Hunter Henry in my Davante Adams lineup and not TJ Hawkinson. It's like, dude, they project nearly the same. And same similar ownership and everything. So why not play the guy that's more correlated with your chalk player than someone that's in a completely different game? To me, that's the thing that doesn't make sense. It's not. You can make the excuse, which could be true, that not many players on the other side of the game project well. And if that was the case, then at least I could understand that, right? Some people, you stack the Chiefs and you look at the other side of the game and go, well, none of them project well. Right. So it's like, maybe I don't run it back there. But we're talking about players that, like, in comparison to other players you could have played, like, project similarly. So correlate your lineups then if they project similarly, rather than like I need to get onesies and twosies. It's like it's so much easier exponentially to get 4 or 5 things right than it is to get 9 things right, 8 things right. So the more that you could reduce the amount of things that you could get right, the higher probability that you have of winning first place. Doesn't mean it's guaranteed, of course not, but at least reduces. Now you're trying to win a 6 event parlay rather than a 9 event parlay. But there are plenty of people that throw in lineups that are 9 event parlays, and just with the sheer masses of them, someone's going to hit.
And so, like, you were talking earlier that you played, like, I think you said 10% of Danny Amendola. He was right around the same price as Perryman, another guy that was super popular from another game. So all you had to do with your Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams stack was throw in Danny Amendola, same price range, get your 3-man game stack, get off of a chalky piece that you would potentially play with it. That is what we're getting at. Jonathan Taylor was 15 to 20% owned. Nelson Aguilar was 1 to 3% owned. There's how you get your non-chalk piece. And if you look at Nelson Aguilar's price range, there was, I think Kiki Kote was in that price range. Like that is what we're getting at. Like you can
you're gonna play you play David Montgomery in your
Yeah.
lineup, and then you plug in Blenderhd Perriman in that lineup, and you go like, why can't you play Chad Henson instead of? It's the same price.
Same price.
You're already playing David Montgomery, and David Montgomery is going to be fairly enough owned. So why are you playing another higher? You're playing a similarly high owned Blenderhd Perriman when you have you have a guy in the same price that if you looked at projections would project about the same as Chad Hansen and Blenderhd Perriman at a very similar projection. Okay, so if you're playing David Montgomery in the lineup, play Chad Hansen. If you're not playing David Montgomery in the lineup, let's say if I'm playing Chris Carson in my lineup. Am I playing Chad Hansen? No, I'm playing Blenderhd Perriman. I mean, because I'm playing a Seahawk in the line. I mean, if you have a choice between these very similarly projected players, it's not. I just want to highlight. It's not. You should give up 10 points in projection for the sake of correlation. We're not talking about, well, if you're going to play David Montgomery, then you should be playing, name it the fifth, Stephen Mitchell. Maybe he comes off
the backup, the third string tight end. That's all
right. We're not talking about that. We're talking about players that already project similarly to one another. Maybe by a point difference. Maybe you give up a point. So we're not saying that you should give up, the 5-10 median points for the sake of like, well, should I play the easiest slam dunk play at 3,900 or play a guy that's projected 5 points lower just for the sake that he's in the same? Like, he probably shouldn't give up 5 median points for the correlation, but 1, with the variance of football, like just do that. Like that's we talk about this every week. Really, that's what it comes down to. We're not bemoaning the fact that less people correlate because they don't care about correlate. Like they're unaware of it whatsoever. It's just that when you have options, that's what you should be doing. And when you don't have options, then I understand if you don't do it.
Well, it's like Curtis Samuel and Robbie Anderson this week. You had Hamler, you had Tim Patrick. They're all in that like price range of the chalky, cheap wide receivers. It's not always going to work. Then like we know that going in, but it's gonna hit at a higher profit margin when it does work than when like you're just playing a bunch of chalk teams and chalk players, chalk one-offs. Like chalk one-offs is the worst way to finish in the cash and not finish in the top 1% or whatever.
Right, you'll cash more often. Right,
yeah, you'll cash more often. Like, if that's what you're trying to do,
you'll
sure.
Get you 2x, but if you're sitting there and you've been playing NFL DFS for the past 3 or 4 years, and you're like, I haven't come in top 10 ever in any large field contest, it's likely because you're playing 2 chalky lineups.
Yeah, or you're correlating and then your non-correlated parts are like chalk one-offs. Like you played a bunch of correlations with. Say you played Adams and Rodgers, and then you like played one-offs of Perryman and McKisnick. Like you're playing chalk one-offs, and that's just not like even if you win with that lineup, You might even tie in a large field tournament because other people are going to be playing those chalk one-offs in the chalk stacks.
Well, you're more likely not going to win. That in order for that type of lineup to win, it needs to score 320 points. I mean, because so much of the field has those points also. So like a very common thing that top GPP players will say, and you'll notice even if you go through results DB and you notice, especially on a game like NBA or MLB that happens every day, so you can you get a large enough sample size. You'll notice that the top ranked players on the RG leaderboard, top 50, whatever, good ones. They don't have to be on the leaderboard to be good players, but they tend to be. Win on slates where the chalk fails. Like if you're going to see the top ranked players coming in first place, it's typically on low scoring slates. High scoring slates in NBA, when the GPP winning score has to be 430 points, most likely the person that wins is not going to be like a top GPP player, because basically you have to jam in as much chalk as you can and get different in like some 1% spot that who knows how to predict that. You pretty much have to have the nuts at that. Like the optimal theoretical build is the winner. Like we see a lot of times in NFL, if you do the knapsack problem and just take exactly what happened and say, what is the highest scoring possible lineup? And let's say the GPP winning score was 240. There was probably a lineup that could have scored 280. Right? Like if you this guy who was 0.3% owned and this, like if you put it together. So like you don't need the nuts. But when all the chalk hits, you pretty much that theoretical optimal, that if we knew all the results beforehand, that's the highest amount of points you could ever get packed into one lineup based on the results. It's going to be much closer, right? It's going to be, you're going to pretty much need that lineup. But when chalk fails, that doesn't mean you fail. All the chalk fails, but when the scoring is lower, it gives yourself so much higher probability of winning without having to get the theoretical optimal lineup. We saw that one slate with Travis Fulgham and Chase Claypool, right? Out of the blue, before we knew who they were, right? And someone had the two of them together and they're 0.0% owned. Like that's the only way do you want to have to win that way? Or do you want to win in a way where, well, if Derrick Henry fails and I have this correlation here, and if I score 220 points, you can win $100,000. Like that's so much easier to do than I'm going to take all the projections and I'm just going to jam 150 chalk lineups in and hope that one of them is the nuts. The likelihood of it is lower and possibly tied with other lineups because other people do that. And then okay, this line I need to get 80th percentile outcomes from literally every player in my lineup. Because if one of them has a 60th percentile outcome, nope, done. You're on 114th place. Like every 1 point less that you're having this chalky 180% cumulative ownership lineup, they have to be, the chalk has to be the nuts in every spot. And it's hard to win that way because other people have those pieces. So I know we harp on these things over and over and over again. I say it on my streams. I say it in my course. It's not about winning in 1 week, right? We don't know what's going to happen in one. Oh, I don't know. Is this going to be the week Derrick Henry puts up 202, or is it the week where Henry puts up 80-1? I don't know. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. It's a Jacksonville defense, whatever. But I'm just thinking in terms of if I played this out 1,000 times, what would show me the most money? So I'm going to build that way. Now in NFL, we only have 17 weeks, so it's kind of hard because it's a small sample size. But once we get into NBA, I know Stevie, we're going to be starting up NBA in regular season in 8-9 days. You're going to be able to play every day, afternoon slates and whatever. So you'll be able to see this a little bit more practically, studying every day and go, oh, I noticed that, when chalk fails, hey, I could get a top 10 score. But if I try to jam in on the slates where you need to jam in all the chalk and that happens to win, you'll notice dude, how do you get a 440 point score? Like, I'm just never going to build that way. And just like, I know I'm losing those days. And I don't care because I'm going to play 150 slates throughout the course of a season. So those are the days that I just lose. That's perfectly fine.
That's the point of the show, right? Like, we do this on Monday every week, because not because we want to sit here and talk about, oh, this hit, this didn't hit. We're still trying to help you over the course of time get better. Like, I do this show with Blender on Monday mornings because I want to try to help you get better. I had to learn this the hard way. Blender did this by researching, like downloading CSVs. I had to go back and I used to go back and look at, I found notebooks this past weekend in my garage. I was cleaning my garage. I found notebooks from 7, 8, 9 years ago where I would write down top players lineups and dissect them and see what I was doing wrong at the time. So we are trying to help you get better, and NBA is coming up. NBA is one of the sports you can use correlation and get an edge on your field, on the field, by so much more. I think it's very important in as far as correlating for basketball and football. Baseball, I have stack whoever you want.
As long as you're stacking.
Yeah,
there's still
stack whoever you want.
Stevie, there are still people that come to me and say, is there a benefit to not stacking? I'm like, why'd you never? No, you always stack.
Maybe on Showdown.
yeah, maybe on smaller slates. Yeah, okay, on smaller slates, sure.
Smaller
correlation doesn't matter as much. Yeah, I get it. But on 13 game slates where they're like, I'm just gonna play a 2-2-2-1. I'm gonna play the good old Dino 1-1-1-1-1-1-1 stack and be like, dude, what do you like? Yes, that could win today, but I mean, in the long run, that's a losing strategy. So, why don't you just stack 5 guys from a team? And go from that. Well, do I play the 3 on the other? Whatever you want. As long as you're stacking 5, at least you're doing more than anyone else than normally does on DK, other than the sharper players. But it's already the stuff has already mathematically been analyzed. So I mean, we're in it. We're in DFS. It's coming up to 2021. Stevie, you've been playing since it came. I mean, DFS is 12 years old at this point. If you knew, Stevie, what you know now, back in 2009, playing, you'd be sitting here in a mansion, right?
Yeah. Man, I wish, I wish, gosh, I wish. And I was successful, my second and third year moving forward, but
right, because the edge back then, if you had the information and you knew enough about sports, you could beat the brain dead people that didn't. But imagine knowing all the data analysis and all the projections and all the stuff that is available to us now. Imagine having that in 2011. Your name would be you'd be raking in everything. I mean, you'd lose plenty of days also, but at the end of the year, you'd have 6-7 figures. They're easy.
I remember STL Cards was ahead of the game on FanDuel in baseball, 4-4 stacking. And he made a ton of money one season before everybody really caught on to 4-4 stacking over there. So yeah, it's crazy, but we're going to get out of here. Week 14 was fun. Week 14 was one of my favorite slates on the year going in, knowing that it was just such a great tournament slate. So, Jordan, anything else before we get out of here?
No, I mean, if you want to learn more about those types of concepts, I got a course, as always, theoryofdfs.com, and it's 15 hours. It'll if you're still not grasping those the macro concepts of the game and they apply to all sports, go check that out. It's like having me in your pocket, and you could always listen and re-listen and have those fundamentals constantly in your head reinforced, and then play. You listen, you play, you listen, you play, you listen, you play. You will get better.
Yeah, and again, if you're a subscriber here at RotoGrinders, if you have premium, take advantage of Discord. Discord is just so you have to take advantage of it. There's so much information that is exchanged in Discord. I reply to just about anybody that messages me, and try to reply to everybody.
Too many people. There are some people I probably shouldn't reply to.
I feel like you might be the only person that have more messages than me in Discord. You are like PSU fans. Like I don't know. I have a lot. So, but either way, if you guys are a premium member here at RotoGrinders, if you have a question about what we're talking about as well, you can do that. Like Jordan said, you can check out his book, theoryofdfs.com/masterclass. They do a podcast as well. Was it once a week, right? Or is it
Yeah,
twice a
about
week?
once a week. Yeah, on my
Yeah.
YouTube channel. And,
Yep.
and
So
whatever. Search on iTunes, whatever. Go to my Twitter. It's all there. So whatever.
there you go. That's going to wrap it up here for week 14. We'll be back tomorrow talking esports. We got a 3-game CSGO slate that starts off the last big tournament of the year for CSGO. So we're going to talk about that, break that down, talk about the tournament in general. So make sure you guys are checking that out on Tuesday. Good tournaments up on DraftKings and FanDuel for that. So that's going to wrap it up. Good luck in your contest, and we'll see you again next week.